Well, hey there, friend. It's a juicy, somewhat controversial topic today that we're going to be speaking about, but I think that it's really, really important. And I just want to bring you some truth and some fresh perspective and some wisdom around the topic of public schools. And I want to talk about whether or not public schools are getting scary. And I also want to share with you a little bit later on in the episode 3 simple steps that you can take in order to switch from public school and to be able to start homeschooling effectively, legally, and very quickly. When I decided to approach this topic today, I was trying to decide whether to come at it really fired up or to remain very, very calm and to kind of tiptoe around and try to not be offensive to anyone, just come at it on neutral ground, right? Because really the desire of my heart is not to bash anyone. It's not to put anyone down. It's not to step on toes. I don't want to come at this topic emotionally charged up, although I am very passionate about this topic. And I am very passionate about calling out and loving truth, the things that we are seeing today. And I am very passionate about being a mama bear and doing what's best for my kids. And so, again, the point of this today is not to bash public schools. It's not to bash teachers. In fact, God bless you. We need great teachers out there. We also need moms who are great teachers, and you are very capable of being both a mom and a teacher to your kids. We'll get into that a little bit later. But really, I just wanted to make you aware of the truth about what your kid might be experiencing on a daily basis if they are currently in public school. I just wanted to bring you some truth around this so that you really can take a look at the situation with wisdom. Because the truth is that public schools are getting scary. We live in the middle of nowhere, the absolute middle of nowhere. The big town that's close to us has a population of less than 2,000 people. So we have a county-wide school, and the school is very small. And so it might be a little bit wild to know that last school year alone in our local public school that we had a teacher who was let go for a supposed misappropriate relationship with a student. Honestly, the full truth never really came out about the whole situation, which really kind of bothered me. I really don't know which way that, situation went and what the truth really was, but the fact that it was even a situation or a possible situation, I felt like was very, very alarming. Our local, very tiny, again, very small school went on lockdown twice last school year. There was at least one that I know of shooting threat in our tiny little local school last year. We kind of have a track record for kids being bullied, honestly, and there are language issues and there are behavior issues that, I'm not kidding you, things that I hear from kids, not only high school age kids, but also all the way down to elementary kids, things that would make your grandma absolutely have a heart attack, and language that would probably even make you cringe. And if you don't believe me, then there's actually a little clip that I want to share with you today. This clip was taken several years back. My kids, I was raised in public school and my kids were public schooled um for several years. I'm trying to share my screen here. Um they were public schooled for several years, and in the last uh, few years, my one of my kids was coming home to me and just constantly telling me, Mom, the situation on the bus is really bad. Like, I just really don't want to be there. I don't want to ride the bus. And I just kept saying, like, oh, be light, be salt, like, be kind, just brush it off. And the truth is, I had no idea how very, very, very bad the environment was on the bus that he was riding, until he came home one day. He had very discreetly, very anonymously just pointed his phone down and recorded an audio clip of some of the language that was happening on the bus. And before I play the clip for you today, I really do want to warn you that it's very explicit. So if you're listening and you've got little kids around you, I want you to go ahead and press pause because the language that you're about to hear is very inappropriate. It's very shocking. And it was happening on a public school bus full of elementary age students. I'm going to go ahead and play that for you now.
Shut the fuck up! Nobody even wants you here, so shut the fuck up! I'm the fucking master of that! Fuck you, dumbass son of a bitch!
Okay, so I don't know if that's shocking to you, but to me, that was very shocking. Very absolutely like I'm shaking right now just actually listening back through that clip, which again, it was several years back and it was very shortly taken before I pulled my kids out of public school. At that point I was just done with it because I realized some other small things had been happening and happening. And then that was like the cherry on top. I realized it really was no longer a good or even a safe environment for my kids. So, as wild as that clip was, and explicit as that clip and that language was, imagine if your kids were being exposed not only to language like that constantly and that it's being allowed and it's just around them all the time on the playground, on the school bus, but imagine if your kids were also being exposed to pornography, to teen sex, to homosexuality, to drug and alcohol use, gender confusion on purpose. And if they were in a daily situation and or a culture where these things are accepted and even expected, right? These compromise values accepted and expected in that setting. Imagine that. We would really like to stick our head in the sand and say, that's not happening to my kid. That's not happening at my kid's school. No way. But it is. It is happening to your kids, and it is happening a lot if they are currently in a public school setting. I remember my daughter coming home one day from school, again, back when she was in public school. She was somewhere in that second, third grade area. And I remember her telling me, Mom, this boy so and so said to my friend so and so, I want to have sex with you. What does that even mean, Mom? And she's like second, third grade, right? I mean, crazy. Of course, I then went to the mom of the little girl and filled her in on the situation. But it's like, no second grade child should be hearing about things like that, should be having conversation around things like that, unless it's in a safe place with their parents. The truth about sending kids to public school is that they are currently being and going to be exposed to and influenced by a lot of stuff that no child should ever be pushed into. They are going to be a product of the environment that they are spending time in. If your kids are in public school, they are spending 6 to 8 to 9 hours a day in this type of environment. And let me just tell you that environment matters. We become like who we hang around. We are the sum of the 5 people that we are spending the most time with. We are the sum of the environment that we are constantly saturated in. We are a product of our environment. Your child is a product of the environment that they are being exposed to, that they are spending time in. Now, you may be wanting to just absolutely come at me with this thing that sounds something like, well, it's my kid's mission field. They're supposed to go be light in this mission field. They're supposed to shine their light in the darkness in the setting of the public school. It's their mission field. I used to think the same thing until I realized you would never send an untrained missionary into the heart of Africa, into the heart of a people who had never heard the gospel, into the heart of a people who were ravenous cannibals. That's what we're doing by sending our little children into a public school setting. We're literally sending them into a lion's den. We're throwing them to the wolves. And I say this please hear my heart that I say this in loving truth, right? You would not send an unequipped, untrained missionary into a mission field, but that's what we're doing as parents when we send our young children into public school. They have not been discipled yet. They are not able to stand firm in their faith yet, right? With theology and apologetics. And I remember having a time when one of my children were physically cornered in a public school setting and grilled in elementary school about why they didn't think it was okay to be gay in elementary school. And it's like they're just not equipped to answer those kind of questions, right? That's our job as parents to raise up our kids and disciple them and to be able to pour into them and give them a firm foundation in their faith to be able to decipher and navigate situations like that out in the real world, right? And so by the time that they're grown into young adults, then if they have been home with us and discipled by us, then they are equipped to stand strong and firm in their faith because they have those foundations. Okay, I'm a little passionate about this. So, if all of this, if everything I've shared so far has you even thinking about the possibility of homeschool, then I want you to hang with me because I'm about to share a talk with you that I did for a homeschool summit last summer. And inside of that talk, I will give you the 3 simple steps that you need to be able to pull your kids out of public school and to be able to start homeschooling them. By the way, I want you to know that you are absolutely not alone if you are considering making the switch from public school to homeschool. There is a homeschool revolution that is happening right now because parents are waking up to the truth and they want better for their kids. They want better for their kids. They want them out of that environment and in a good environment. The number of homeschoolers are on the absolute rapid rise. So, if you're interested in that, if you want to join the homeschool revolution, then go ahead and keep listening. I'm going to go ahead and hit play on that talk. Hey, mom friends, we've got to start out with a story today. So, one time I was busily typing on my computer. I was planning out what our next week of homeschool would look like. And all of a sudden, I hear this crash at the bottom of the stairs right outside my door. And I was thinking that my kids were playing a trick on me, but I quickly became really aware that this was not a joke my kids were playing upon the realization of the strange thing that I was looking at. There was this green lump that had landed with a really hard thud on the floor in that particular spot. And my brain was trying to make sense of exactly what I was looking at when all of a sudden there were tiny little legs and claws that began to wiggle. And then all of a sudden that green lump flipped over. And I realized it was actually our pet turtle, Slider. She had crawled out of her tank. She'd thumped and bumped all the way down to the bottom of the stairs. And there she had landed with a hard thud on the floor. Never in a million years would I have guessed that in my late 30s that I would be a homeschool mom of 3 kids with a pet turtle who, by the way, lived to tell its dramatic story. Never did I ever think that I would be a Midwest homeschool mom with chickens in the yard and this unquenchable thirst for persuading my kids to act out spoof videos featuring famous Americans of the past. You can actually find those videos on my YouTube channel, by the way. But here I am, I'm living it, I'm loving it, and today I get to share it with you. Hey, friend, I'm Katie Hedrick, and overthinking, meticulously planning, what I like to call realistically optimistic homeschooling mom. And I'm also a total homebody who seriously loves iced coffee. In my free time, I host the Joy at Home podcast, and I love to help Christian moms step into homeschool and create more joy in their hearts and homes. So let me back up just a few years and paint a picture for you of what my life was like and what my family's life was like before Slider the turtle and homeschool were even a thing in our world. My husband and I are entrepreneurs, and our 20 years of life together has looked a lot like the movie The Greatest Showman. It's actually my favorite movie of all time. But truly, in our life, there have been so many ups and downs and twists and turns. So it really wasn't all that surprising that early 2020 found us in the middle of a new business and building a new home from the ground up. Literally, my husband was building this new home with his very own hands. We were actually living back in my childhood home with my mom at the time after we had thought that we had closed the sale on the home that we'd been living in. Unfortunately, that sale fell through, which left us juggling multiple homes, multiple businesses, multiple kids who were in public school at that time, and as you can imagine, a lot of bills. To say the least, it was messy. But then in March of 2020, along came COVID. And like it did for many families, it rocked our world. Suddenly, our kids were home from school, and my daytime working hours were all of the sudden non existent. And I remember feeling completely lost and overwhelmed and unprepared and unequipped to do anything with my children's education. Yet, I was determined to try to do something, anything really. Being a planner, I slapped a schedule on the wall and I slapped name tags on the kitchen table, and we were off with this homeschooling thing. But it took less than 1 day for me to realize that this makeshift public school at home was going to be a complete disaster. And let me tell you, a disaster it was. I started thinking about a local homeschool family that I knew. And so I texted the mom and I asked her, I said, "How are things going over there?" Because I really felt like we were struggling. And she responded that they were getting along just fine, that nothing had really changed in their world. They were just home, living and learning and doing what they do, what they had always done. And it totally blew my mind. And so our family took a deep breath and we started just doing life together and learning through that. We explored nature, we did science experiments, we played games, and we created these just genuinely happy and educational moments. And we documented all of it and we started a YouTube channel, and it was honestly so much fun. And our family grew in relationship and in spirit. And I am honestly so thankful for that crazy season of COVID and what it did for my family, because little did I know that in doing all of that, we were actually homeschooling. And so the next year, I actually sent my kids back to public school. And I remember we were fighting the mask mandates, and I was feeling so uneasy as the mama. And I was just trying to ignore this strange stirring that was kind of happening in my heart. But this little voice in my head and in my heart just began to whisper, "What if you homeschooled?" And it was a question that began to just replay over and over and over inside of me. Simultaneously, though, these doubts were spiraling through my mind. I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. I didn't know how to do it, and there was no way that I could figure it out. I was flat out just not equipped, or so I thought. Over the next 2 years, I wrestled with the thought of homeschooling while little things kept happening that made me more and more and more uneasy about public school and more curious about what it could look like to pull my kids out of public school and to start homeschooling. Finally, in the spring of 2022, I found myself meeting with our local HSAP, or Homeschool Assistance Program coordinator. And I was asking her every question that I could think of. And she was so kind and knowledgeable. And she shared from her heart about everything that was on my very, 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 very long list of questions. And for the first time, I felt like I had support, like I had someone in my corner. And I thought that maybe, just maybe I could actually homeschool my kids. After that meeting, I drove down to the river just a couple miles away and I laid it all out in one big, gigantic, heartfelt prayer. And I remember talking to God and telling him, if homeschooling is really what you want our family to do, then don't just equip me, but also put overflowing joy in my heart about this because I am still just not sure. The next day, my mom asked me where I was at with my thoughts on homeschooling, and I found myself gushing about what I'd learned during my meeting the day before, all the ideas that were swirling and spinning in my head. A few minutes into that conversation, or me just going on and on and on, I paused with the revelation that in less than 24 hours, the Lord had already answered my prayer because there was already so much unexplainable joy in my heart around homeschooling. And so, where the 2020 school year had found us homeschooling by circumstance, the new 2022 school year found us homeschooling by choice. And I stand before you today as the mom who swore she couldn't and wouldn't homeschool. And I also stand before you today as the mom who would never go back because she fell in love with homeschooling. And the truth is, I know that I'm not alone. I'm not the only mom who's felt that little nudge and then a big conviction to move forward in pursuing homeschool, even though it seems a little scary, like a journey into the unknown. More than ever before, public school families are waking up to the reality that public school is not what it used to be. So much has changed. Curriculums have changed, policies have changed, the demeanor inside of the building itself has changed. And unfortunately, a lot of that change has not been good change. In fact, many of the values being pushed in public school today do not align with my family's personal values and convictions, and likely they don't align with yours either. As a result, more and more families with kids in public school want to make the leap into homeschool, but it feels overwhelming. Where does one even begin? What curriculum should be used? Well, people think I'm crazy for doing this. What about my kids? I want the best for them, but it's such a big change. What about socialization? Will homeschool make my kids weird? And it spirals on and on and on. I know I was there. But the truth is, are you ready for it? Stepping into homeschool doesn't have to be scary. In fact, it could end up being the best choice that you ever make. It truly was for us. So let's talk about 3 ways that you can ditch fear and start homeschooling the easy way. Just 3 simple steps. Step number 1, find your why. Here is how you get and stay committed to homeschooling for the long game and not just for a short term. Find and know your why. Why would homeschooling be the best choice for your family? And you need to get really specific with the good, the bad, and the ugly. Consider, what does life and education look like right now for your family? Are your kids being spiritually fed? Are they being stretched academically? Maybe they need specialized help to learn more efficiently. Are they getting that right now? Are the hours of their day and your day well spent? Do you have time for rest and family connection, or is your whole family always on the go and totally exhausted? Do you have moments to live and learn and grow together in the way that your heart desires? How would that story read differently if homeschooling were a part of it? I want you to imagine long, slow mornings and snuggles as a means of connection. Or imagine your kids being done with school by noon each day and then the freedom to go play outside or to pursue their interests and their hobbies in the afternoon. Imagine a redemption of your own education because you and your kids are all developing into lifelong learners. I want you to imagine being able to equip your kids with wisdom and being able to feed their faith before they're sent out into the mission field. Before we started homeschooling, I bought into the thought that public school was the mission field and that my kids were the missionaries. And then I realized that you wouldn't send an unequipped missionary or a baby Christian into the heart of a community who didn't know Christ. No way. That's like sending them into the lion's den. Mom, your kids are the mission field and you are the missionary in this season of life. This is the time and place to raise your kids up and to teach them about the Lord and to equip them with his word so that they're able to stand firm in their faith when they go out into the battlefield of the world. Does that make sense? Does that resonate? Maybe you're starting to look at things just a little bit differently. So tell me your story. What is your why? Why might homeschooling actually be the best choice for your family? And how could it change your family's legacy for generations to come? My teenage daughter, she recently told me, she said, Mom, you didn't just change my life by pulling me out of public school, but you've also changed the lives of your future grandchildren. And I'm so glad that we stepped into homeschooling. My chin hit the floor. I was like, wow. My why for homeschooling included freedom, time freedom, faith freedom, relationship freedom, curriculum freedom. And my family got all of that plus so much more with homeschooling. Step number 2, go to the website hslda.com. This website is your homeschooling best friend. It's the ultimate starting point, and it's where you can do your deepest research about homeschooling. hslda.com is the place to find your state's laws, whatever they might be, for disenrolling out of public school and for getting started with homeschooling. You'll find all of the important dates and rules and requirements that are relevant to your specific state at hslda.com. Things like tracking how many days or hours you'll need per year, testing regulations if there are any, and high school credit regulations, what's needed for that, and so much more. All the important things are there at hslda.com. It's where you want to start. And you can also become a member there, and I so highly recommend it. HSLDA is a great resource that you'll definitely want to have in your back pocket. Step number 3 is to find a support system to encourage you and support you through this process. My dear mama friend, this is crucial because you will need people in your corner who will encourage you and cheer you on. In total honesty, if you're looking to become a pioneer homeschooler in your family, I was one. You will most likely have family members who question all your choices and your sanity, and they may not be the best support system for you right out of the gate. That was the case for me to some extent, although some of my family members who were originally adamantly opposed to our family stepping into homeschool, they've now seen how my kids are thriving, and those same family members are now some of our very biggest supporters. But that initial decision, it really did feel lonely. It was a little bit of a lonely season, and it felt kind of scary without some of my extended family on board. Until slowly but surely, I pulled people into my circle who were encouraging and supportive, other homeschool moms, our local homeschool co-op, even online support groups. And I read books and I listened to podcasts and I spent time in prayer and I spent time in the word. And little by little, which is the best way to get things done, my confidence grew and grew. I would love to be a part of your support system. So, the Joy at Home podcast offers encouragement and homeschooling tips and fantastic guest speakers. And I also have a free homeschool curriculum guide that you can download at teachme2homeschool.com. And that curriculum guide features my top 10 picks for homeschool curriculum, and it will make your life so much easier. Instead of spending countless hours going down the rabbit hole of research, you can just simply take a look at my tried and true list and start making some decisions. Again, you can grab that free curriculum guide at teachme2homeschool.com. Enjoy that resource. Mom, in full transparency, there will be hard days and moments when you're homeschooling. And in those moments, you'll need to know that you're not alone. And honestly, you're not alone. There are so many other homeschool moms who are right there in the trenches with you. And we have tough days and we have beautiful, wonderful days with our kids. We have moments where we question whether we're doing this thing right, whether our kids are learning what they need to be, whether we're preparing them well enough for the real world. But it only takes a second to think about how we've traded early mornings and bus rides for slow mornings and family road trips. How there's no wasted time in our homeschool. There's no standing in line or raising a hand and asking to go to the bathroom. That's not even the real world anyway. We think about how the kids are studying Christian based curriculum instead of the garbage and nonsense that's flowing down and infiltrating the public school system. We pause and we just think about how, with homeschooling, there's peace and rest and freedom. And it is hard sometimes, but mama friend, it is so good. It's so worth it. If you're considering homeschooling, I want to reassure you that you are on the right track. Your choice to help your family step into homeschool is going to change your family's legacy for years to come. And so I'll leave you with the quote that solidified my decision to take the leap of faith and begin homeschooling. It simply read like this: She wanted to change the world, so she began to homeschool her kids. If I can do it, you can do it too. I'm cheering you on, and I'd love to support you on your journey. Remember, you can get started with my free curriculum guide over at teachme2homeschool.com, or you can connect with me by subscribing to the Joy at Home podcast.